are one. I would like to read something to you that you already know, but nonetheless, I need to share it with you. In this part of the competition, you are taking on a fictional business identity and assigning a fictional business identity to the judges. Please make sure everyone knows who you are and who we are before you begin. You'll have 25 minutes with the 5-minute cushion to describe the legal, financial, and ethical dimensions of the problem and to recommend a solution that passes muster on all 3 counts. During this time, the team will be uninterrupted. When you have finished, the judges will ask you questions for 20 minutes. During the Q&A, both you and the judges stay in character. After the Q&A, the judges will give you feedback outside the role. Outside the role playing. Some important things to keep in mind. The ethical aspect of your analysis is the most important part. However, these should be described in a simple, practical, common sense fashion. Using technical, philosophical terminology or basing your argument on religious or theological grounds will be considered a serious weakness. During this presentation, every member of the team must have some sort of speaking role. I would love, before we start, to have each of you indicate who you are and what your major is. And I want to remember that at the end to tell you, so I'm going to tell you now, so I won't have to remember at the end, that you will be getting your information and the link to the 10-minute tomorrow, and you'll get it, I believe, tomorrow, but I will check that before we leave. All right, please tell us who you are in real life.
Right. My name is Andrew Pedonastro. I'm originally from Long Island, New York, and I'm at the Cabelli School of Business at Fordham University studying finance and mathematics.
And what's your year?
I'm a freshman.
Great. Who's next?
Hi, my name is Melina L. I'm originally from Redondo Beach, California, South Bay area. I am a marketing major, and I am also a freshman at the Cabelli School of Business.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Conrad. I'm from Long Island, New York. I'm a freshman at the Cabelli School of Business, studying finance.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jacqueline Emanuel. I'm originally from Thousand Oaks, California. I'm also a freshman and I'm studying math and finance at the Cabelli School of Business.
Terrific. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Michael Crespo. I am also originally from Long Island, New York, and I'm a freshman studying accounting.
Great. We have everyone. Now, will you tell us a little bit about who we are supposed to be and who you are? And then we can begin.
We'll be presenting as a consulting group analyzing the food industry, and the judges will be executives in the food industry.
And is this a meeting that you've conveyed, I mean, that you've brought people together? I mean, a meeting of the food executives.
Yes,
is it a
yes.
conference or something?
Yeah, it's a conference in a sense to promote change, and that's what our consulting group has been hired to do.
Okay. Judges, any questions about that? All right. Then when you all are ready, I'll let you tell me when you hit the start button, so I will.
Are we able to share a presentation? It's letting me know that the host has disabled participant sharing.
We just need to make them a co-host.
Yeah, let's see here. Where is that setting? Oh,
So which one of you, the students, your wonderful team, which one of you will be sharing the presentation from your computer?
That'll be me,
So
Jacqueline.
Ravi, if you just hover over Jacqueline's picture, you'll see in the top right corner, 3 little dots. It should allow you to make her a co-host.
yeah, I see it. Make host.
Yep, make her a co-host and she'll be able to share the presentation.
Okay, there you go. Try it now, Jacqueline.
Thanks.
We're ready to begin.
Great. I'm hitting start now.
Good morning and welcome to our presentation on deceptive promotional techniques in the food industry. I'm Andrew Pedonastro. I'm joined by Melina Au, Conrad Baha, Michael Crespo, and Jacqueline Emanuel. So going into deceptive techniques, essentially what this is this misleading or deceitful advertising strategies in order to increase customer acquisition rate and ultimately increasing total revenue. And the 3 specific methods or techniques that we're going into are misleading nutritional claims, misleading serving size impressions, and greenwashing. So going into the first technique is misleading nutritional claims. Some companies overvalue and overstate the healthiness of their product. So for the example, in this, we're using Nutella. Nutella has claimed that their product is part of a balanced diet. However, when you look on the right, you can see the percentage of sugar that comprises the food, as well as the percentage of palm oil that comprises the food as well. This is not indicative that this product should serve as part of a breakfast or part of a balanced diet in general. The nutritional profile and nutritional makeup indicates that it's more of a dessert-like product and something that should be consumed in a limited consumption. So going on to the next slide, you see a direct comparison of Nutella, which claims to be part of a breakfast and a balanced diet, to a Hershey's chocolate bar, which is known to be a dessert. In calorie amount, they are the same per serving. However, Nutella has 2 grams of sugar more per serving, and you would not serve your child a Hershey's bar for breakfast. And so Nutella's strategy of marketing towards individuals who want a quick and easy breakfast meal that is also healthy is misleading in a sense. Going into the second technique, misleading serving size impressions. So the FDA allows a food that is under 5 calories per serving to be labeled as calorie-free. And this is problematic because there can be unreasonable serving sizes like this PAM, for example, where it's 1 serving size is 1/4 of a spray, 1/4 of a second of a spray, which is unrealistic because most people would do 1 to 2 seconds per spray, and there are over 700 servings per bottle. So people believe that they're consuming 0 calories when in reality, there are many hidden calories and many hidden issues with the foods that they're consuming. And specifically with this PAM cooking spray and people who are striving to lose weight and essentially have a balanced diet, consuming more calories than what you would say you logged or what you understand that you're consuming can lead to problematic issues in the future.
The third deceptive advertising technique we will cover is greenwashing. By greenwashing, we refer to the misleading or deceptive advertising by an organization or company to represent a more environmentally responsible public image. An example of greenwashing can be seen in the Starbucks strawless lids. In response to the social issue of sustainability and the trend of shifting away from plastic straw usage, Starbucks replaced the lid and straw combination with strawless lid cups. According to the Starbucks Chief Sustainability Officer, Michael Kuburi, the recyclable strawless lids for customers across the US and Canada was another step in their journey to reduce their environmental footprint. While this may seem like a commendable step towards environmentally friendly practices, studies have shown that this new lid weighs about 0.5 gram more than the original combination, about 2.55 grams compared to the 1.35 to 1.96, depending on the smaller or large straw size used with the original lid. In addition, Starbucks does not have a lot of information regarding how and why you should be recycling these lids, causing about only 9% or contributing to about 9% of the world plastic being recycled.
So diving right into our ethical considerations, we decided to break this up into two main ones. The first being this idea of consequentialism, which is that an action that brings about more benefit than harm is good, while an action that causes more harm than benefit is not. And additionally, that some acts are morally obligatory regardless of their consequences. So in talking about consequentialism to begin with, we are arguing that the overall effects of misleading marketing alone serve as ethical reasoning for why companies should focus on ethical marketing. Misleading marketing can have significant negative impacts on both the consumers and the environment. In terms of health effects on the population, for example, in 1962, about 46% of adults, as exemplified by the bright red, were considered overweight or obese. However, by 2010, that figure had jumped to over 70%, which includes both types of red in this graph. And sugar and fat are suspected as main factors for this jump. Misleading marketing in the implied health benefits of products such as Nutella, as well as in serving sizes as evidenced in Pam cooking spray, can lead to significant overconsumption of certain unhealthy sugars and fats. And overconsumption of these substances has been proven to cause increased risk for cardiovascular disease, increased blood pressure, and inflammation, as well as a higher risk of long-term sugar addiction and continued overconsumption. In terms of harming the environment, greenwashing suggests that a company is more sustainable than it is, which means that consumers are more willing to continue buying large quantities of their product as they're unaware of the effects their actions have on the environment. In the long term, this could have detrimental effects on the environment. Pollution is, as we all know, a significant issue and the cause of many other problems for the planet and humanity as a whole. If, for example, in the Starbucks case, people do not boycott or hold Starbucks responsible for their part in this pollution because they believe that, as they've stated in their ads, they've changed their practices to reduce their carbon footprint and help fight against pollution. They will continue to purchase Starbucks drinks, believing they are supporting the fight against plastics. However, the amount of pollution being caused will stay the same or, as evidence, possibly increase, and could cause serious environmental issues in the future, unbeknownst to the consumers. In this way, we believe that the company has an ethical duty to ensure their customers are not unknowingly worsening their health or the health of the environment, as the negative long-term effects and consequences of these techniques on both the planet and the population are reason enough to call for an end to this misleading marketing.
To continue this discussion of ethical implications, let's take a look at the mission statements or value statements by these three examples that were mentioned earlier. Nutella claims to hold core values in loyalty and trust, respect and responsibility, integrity, motivation, and much more. Conagra, the parent brand of Pam cooking spray, upholds to achieve their vision by demanding unwavering commitment to their values of integrity, internal focus, broad-mindedness, agility, leadership, and results. And finally, Starbucks code of ethics claims to be present, connect with their transparency, dignity, and respect. However, as we had just identified, these misleading marketing techniques demonstrate that these food brands fail to abide by their code of ethics they claim to operate by. As corporate agents that have health impacts in people's lives, these food companies in general have moral obligations to operate morally and ethically, especially since majority of these food companies support some form of ethical conduct code or mission value statements, majority holding claims to loyalty, trust, responsibility, integrity, and transparency. They should be held accountable to uphold their ethical claims. The deceptive advertising techniques, as seen in Nutella's inaccurate nutritional profile impressions, hand cooking sprays, misleading serving sizes and calorie count, and Starbucks greenwashing concerns. These techniques may result in greater profits and unit sales in the short run. However, it is morally and ethically wrong to misguide consumers about the nutritional value of these food products. In the long run, this misinformation can cause severe health effects and harm to the consumers, destroy the brand reputation, and destroy the consumer trust in the food company's product and practices. And this can lead to future declines in profits and unit sales.
Diving into the legal aspects of our case, the FDA is the federal regulatory agency that is responsible for handling food and labeling in the United States. It's responsible for foods, with the exception of meat, poultry, and eggs, are safe, wholesome, and properly labeled. It's important to note that the FDA does not approve individual food labels or nutrition fact labels, but it does require statements on food products to be truthful and not misleading. I'd like to first talk about the case Hohenberg versus Ferrero USA. In 2012, a California mother sued Ferrero USA, the makers of Nutella. The mother was shocked at just how high the content of sugar and fat in the product was, especially considering the fact that it was marketed as like a breakfast food. And the case was eventually settled for $3 million. In response to this, Ferrero did change the visibility of the sugar and fat content of its products, minimizing their legal liability, but did nothing to address the underlying ethical issues of their marketing and product. A second case that I'd like to point out is Pardini versus Unilever. Unilever's "I can't believe it's not butter" spray took advantage of FDA rules with its small serving size and claimed that it was calorie-free and had low fat. A consumer class action lawsuit was brought against Unilever, but eventually, over the course of many years, the case was eventually dismissed. Finally, I'd like to point out Hanscom versus Reynolds Consumer Products. And Reynolds Consumer Products was sued by Hanscom when he alleged that the labeling of the recycling bags misled consumers into believing that they were recyclable when the bags themselves were not recyclable. This case was also litigated over many years, but eventually the plaintiff dropped the case. And to summarize the legal aspects of our case, the companies that we're analyzing aren't necessarily doing things that are illegal, but rather they're immoral. The company, especially in the case of Nutella, the company focused on minimizing its economic liability in the form of civil lawsuits, but did nothing to prevent the ethical issues surrounding its advertising. And we argue that the company should shift from focusing on their legal liability to actually using ethical practices in their advertising. And with long-term health concerns that could arise as over a longer time frame, the companies, if they excessively use misleading advertising, are opening themselves up to lawsuits and class action lawsuits, which will then cost them resources, time, and money.
It is clearly unethical to market with these misleading nutritional claims, size impressions, and greenwashed advertising, and a decision should be made to stop this. Although it might attract people in the short run, it will hurt companies in the long run as people do not like being misled by brands and is potentially hurting customer health without people ever knowing it. There are better approaches to take. One of these approaches would be an inbound marketing strategy. Inbound marketing is a model of marketing based on attracting customers through valuable content. The content can range from making videos, Q&As, articles, just anything else that increases interactions. To prove the financial practicality of this approach, some significant statistics of inbound marketing are that it generates up to 126% more leads and costs 60% less than outbound methods, which are your more traditional marketing strategies such as commercials, meaning more revenue for lower costs. A prime example of inbound marketing is Spotify Wrap Up. At the end of the year, everyone posts their yearly wrap up with their top songs and artists that they've listened to. This service gives Spotify tons of free advertising. We can connect a similar approach to a food brand, Chewy, since it's hard for a food company to make a service exactly like Spotify's Wrap Up. Chewy advertises with many in-depth descriptions of their products, uses plenty of photos and videos, as well as encourages user engagement through Q&As and leaving reviews. With this, Chewy's always tops search results against competitors as they have a large presence on the internet through their content that is constantly being interacted with and expanded by their customers. This is known as owned media, where the more company content and media out there, the more chances for the product to be seen while costing less than large television ads. Another sound marketing approach these companies can take is to be more transparent in building a reputable brand. This comes from having more truthful recommendations, such as properly advertising Nutella as a snack instead of a breakfast item, or describing how a product can be used inside of a healthy diet. These brands also tend to work for the general human good, having fair business practices inside and outside of the company, while working on causing positive changes, such as preventing climate change. An important validating statistic is that 39% of people would switch to brands that are accurate, clear, and honest. And a result of a 28 McKinsey & Company study also indicated that Gen Z consumers increasingly prefer ethical brands. This is extremely important, for in the long term, Gen Z is the future client base. An ethical brand people want comes from a company being honest, transparent, and working for mutual benefit with consumers. An example of a reputable brand that does this is Patagonia. This is a brand that people are proud of buying and sharing that they have bought. This, as well as inbound marketing, leads to earned marketing, as people will share and post the product the companies offer, giving them free advertising, which is obviously better than paying for advertising, and leads the customers to be more satisfied in their products. Another alternative that allows companies such as Pam and Nutella to not completely rebrand is to make a healthier version and a snack version of their product. Justin's hazelnut spread demonstrates that it's very possible to make a healthier version, as it has a healthier nutritional profile and sources organic ingredients and uses minimally processed ingredients. Gatorade is a leading example of this, as a company has many different products for people's many different needs. They have a normal Gatorade for their great flavor and it's used in electrolytes, and then they have their Gatorade Zero for people that are less willing to drink the sugar in a normal product. This allows people to not need to look for alternatives when they might want a healthier product, and be a solution for these companies which brand themselves to be healthier than they really are.
To summarize, the health implications of deceitful promotional techniques are problematic. Around half of Americans believe they're consuming healthy diets, yet obesity rates continue to increase. In addition to this, pollution continues to persist, and these misleading practices by these companies are no help to the effort. It's important to note that there's a financial incentive to deceptively market, because it could, in the short run, lead to a greater customer acquisition rate, resulting in a greater revenue generation. However, with the use of transparent marketing, non-deceptive practice may be more profitable in the long run. As a result, it's reasonable for companies to adopt more affordable, ethical marketing practices, as this could create long-lasting customer-client relationships. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. I guess I'm wondering, based on this conference, what it is you specifically are asking us to do in response to the issues that you've raised. What do you want us to do?
So, in a sense, one thing that we understand is that as executives, there is no reason to create a solution that's not economically viable, right? So I think what's important to note is that the solutions that we ask to implement are creating a level of transparency. So our idea and our understanding here is the solutions that we created. So essentially inbound marketing, a more relatable and transparent marketing strategy, or implementing products that align with the healthy nutritional profile of the claims for these top companies, implementing a more transparent and clear strategy. So that's our request, and that's essentially what we're doing as our consulting team. And it's from the standpoint of ethicality, but also it being economically viable, because in the long run, it could help increase customer retention and improve the revenue.
So something that would include be to like stop advertising Nutella as something that could be a healthy breakfast item when it's really not. And for something like Pam to have a nutrition label that actually shows a more realistic label instead of kind of misguiding people on how many calories are in what they're using.
I think what we'll do is we all have questions, but I'll ask my colleagues to, we'll each do a question and then go back in the circle. So I'll leave it up to Hannah. Do you want to kick it off?
Yes, thank you. One of the questions I had was around one of just the points you had in your presentation. I believe it was under technique 3. I was a little unclear. It said only 9% of it said 9% of the world's plastic is recycled, but then the description, I just wasn't clear. Are you saying that this was contributing to 9% of the world's plastic being recycled, or that in total only 9% of the world's plastic is recycled? Can you just clarify that for me?
Yeah, so only 9% of the recyclable material in the world is actually recycled. So while Starbucks promotes that they are using recyclable products and different plastics that are more biodegradable, they don't have any advertisements or signs that encourage people to recycle. So it contributes to plastic pieces not being recycled and just being pushed into the landfills.
Thank you.
I'll go. First of all, let me just say how incredibly impressed I am that you're all freshmen. that's quite the undertaking you took on as first years. My question is to go to one of your slides had a statement that said a company has an ethical duty to ensure their customers are not unknowingly worsening their health. So I guess my question is you're implying that a company has a duty to do good. Why?
Well, I think that one of our main reasons for why was, especially in the companies that we used as our examples, their codes of conduct explicitly state that they value transparency and they're working for the consumer, not like trying to deceive them. A lot of them said like integrity and things of that nature. So I think when you explicitly state that your goal is to be transparent and to be honest, and to have integrity, you do have a duty to uphold those ideals.
I would also like to add, from just a financial standpoint, when Nutella was sued, it was problematic, and even in headlines, that also ultimately decreases the amount of customers that are interested in the product, because the lawsuit comes out, that Nutella lost, and that they're promoting their product as, a healthy food to consume, when in reality it's not, and so that's not essentially bad advertising. And so one thing that a company that can have that it's very transparent is that it will consistently be advertised as a good and reputable company, and customers and for generations essentially will be working or buying the product. And so essentially it's good from a revenue standpoint as well.
So my question is, taking the Nutella example, as an executive, is it worse for me to be viewed as having put out an inconsistent message in something, a lawsuit most people probably don't pay attention to, whereas the Nutella advertising that's on the TV is very much more frequent, versus saying that my product is an unhealthy breakfast option? I feel like I'm going to lose more customers by being honest about the nature of the product than I am having this one lawsuit come out that most people aren't going to even pay attention to. What do you say to that?
Right. And I completely understand your point. One thing I would just like to kick back on that is that I think they can advertise their product as something other than a breakfast without claiming that it's unhealthy. So part of indicative of the word balanced means that it's inclusive of something that you would have on your day-to-day basics. So a balance is a dairy, a vegetable, a fruit per every single day. And so that's what encompasses a balanced diet. And usually that would encompass healthy foods. And so there's reason to believe that you could say Nutella is a snack. You could say it's an afternoon snack. You could say it's a snack post sports because of the high sugar content, which can help refeed children. But one thing that's important to note that for breakfast specifically, and for just in general, claiming that health aspect is a little bit unreasonable and unethical. And so what I would say in response to that, yes, it's completely not reasonable to say that it's an unhealthy product and not get that the customer acquisition, but it could be feasible to be a little more transparent in respect of claiming that it's a snack, not necessarily a snack that's part of a balanced diet, but more of a snack that's like a candy kind of snack. So we have just more sugary related snacks and also candy, so gummy bears or something along those lines. And because it does have more sugar per serving than a Hershey's bar, it wouldn't be unreasonable for it to be related to such.
I
found
also
that.
think it's important. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I also think it's important to note that they can continue to breakfast as a market item. I mean, not all, and as a breakfast item, not all breakfast items are inherently healthy. I mean, obviously, like syrup is not necessarily the healthiest item on the market. However, I myself put it on my breakfast when I am eating pancakes or something of that nature. So I think it's the actual adjective, the descriptor balanced is, I think, what is the actual misleading part of it. Additionally, I think the younger generation, with the increased use of social media and things like that, often those like legal battles that people might not know about. I think the newer generation is a little more aware of that stuff and is more conscious of trying to like start boycotts for brands and things like that.
So Jacqueline, you actually anticipated my very question, which was, I mean, some of the emphasis here was put on breakfast, but I would argue that of all the meals, breakfast is the one where A, you could probably consume the most sugar because you have the whole rest of the day to burn it off. And B, if you compare it to other breakfast items, there's a lot of sugary breakfast items. I found the comparison to the Hershey bar very powerful, but what if we put up Lucky Charms? What if we put up Cocoa Krispies? What if we put up a Belgian waffle topped with, blueberry syrup and whipped cream? I don't know how Nutella would compare it to that. What do you say to that?
I think that, as I was sort of saying, I think you can continue to market it as breakfast. I mean, like I said, you said we eat unhealthy breakfast foods, but no one, to my knowledge, eats a bowl of Lucky Charms and feels as though they've had a balanced breakfast and are ready to start the day. They're being super healthy and things like that. And so I think that as long as customers are aware that what they're consuming is not necessarily the healthiest item on the market or isn't fulfilling their need for like a fat and a vegetable and a fruit or something like that. I think as long as you're made aware of that, so just maybe taking out the word balance in particular, it would be my response, I guess.
Also, just a little, I'm sorry.
No.
A little note, and as far as, and yes, Lucky Charms and all those sugary cereals are unbelievably concentrated in the sugar. And the thing with Nutella specifically, because it's so concentrated, it could lead to insulin spikes and then crashes, especially for kids. A kid's going to be hyper for the first hour in which he or she consumes the product, and then when he gets to school, will crash. And so that's also a little bit of problematic issue from like a health and insulin standpoint.
We invited you to our food conference because we appreciated that you all have some expertise in our business and knowledge of our products. My confusion a little bit is, I guess, going back to my original question, what do you expect us to do? We're all individual people in our business. You have made interesting case about the importance of ethics and morality. But talk to me about what it is, not the big picture of morality and ethics, but what is it exactly that you see happening that people will understand more intimately than the big term of ethics and morality? What is it, the harm that you're addressing? What's the context of that we could go back to our CEOs and others and talk about more about the harm? And I think that would be great if you could elaborate on it.
Right. And I mean, if I'm not mistaken, it's more like tangible things, like what actionable steps that the company will be able to take, right?
There's that, but it's also a definition. Ethics is a huge label, and narrowing, getting into the more specifics, I think would be helpful to all of us in terms of knowing how we go back to our companies.
Right. And so the first thing I would say to that is I guess the ethics of knowingly, the ethics of like being transparent with consumption specifically. And the reason, the overarching theme of this, especially with two overarching themes, so pollution and obesity. Obesity has continued to rise over the period of time that more individuals have claimed that they're eating a healthy diet. So there's a misinteraction here. More people are believing that they're eating healthy, however, more people are getting obese. And so there's a problem that needs to be addressed. And the more people would like to decide or conclude that they have a healthy diet, people track their calories and still gain weight. And the problem with that is that there are hidden calories, and they're hidden calories in the products that people believe are healthy. And the reason they believe they're healthy is because of these advertising strategies. If the food that they see in the store is transparent and essentially tells them what it is. So if someone's on a diet and Nutella, for example, they decide to consume it for breakfast, like if it was a little more transparent, they would understand in that respect that it wouldn't be part of that balanced diet. And so I think the first initial point is addressing why obesity is continuing to rise and how this is a contributing factor, in a sense of people believe that they're consuming healthier foods when they're really not. And I think it's important for the executives to address, because again, from an economic standpoint, longevity of customers, you want them to not only live longer, but live for generations, in a sense of they understand that it's a product that they value and they've seen healthy benefits from. So something that makes them feel good in the long run. So a product or any sort of, let's say, fibrous seeds. So I know chia seeds are the thing nowadays, and they're very healthy and they have a lot of benefits, and a lot of people see great things from them. And so if a company is very transparent about that, they can use that for generations, families can use that for generations. And I think what's important to address is that those are advertised as is. So they're advertised as the benefits that they have, and it's essentially labeled as a fibrous seed. And so again, the tangible steps to address are more so the purpose of advertising more transparently to improve the health of the United States. And that's not necessarily in the hands or the responsibility of a company, but from a moral standpoint and in alignment with their code of ethics, I think it's something important to consider.
Thank you.
So you mentioned that it's not necessarily our company's responsibility. And I know I'm an attorney, so the legal area of this really interests me, but also whose responsibility is it? And so my question here is, why is it our company's jobs to make sure consumers understand what they're eating? And in the legal part of your analysis, there were some cases you mentioned, and it sounds like they got dropped by the plaintiff or dismissed. So I don't see a lot of risk to our company in, doing a lot more. It's balanced from our eyesight. And so I guess I'm curious, if there's not this huge risk of these legal cases being successful that you mentioned, why is it our company's jobs rather than the consumers to understand what they're eating? They could just as easily eat a donut, so why not our Nutella?
I'd say that the executives of the food companies have a responsibility to increase the profit and market share of their companies. And as time goes on, ethics and transparent advertising is only going to, the importance of that is only going to increase as Generation Z becomes more, a larger proportion of the market base. Generation Z prioritizes companies that are ethical. And so by pursuing transparent marketing, you will actually be able to increase your customer base. Responding to the question regarding the legal cases, although the companies didn't necessarily lose any money in those cases, the cases still painted those companies in a bad light. And if a company uses misleading advertising enough, then their image is going to suffer, bringing down their market share, the customer trust, and their profitability.
So, you know, you talk a lot in this presentation about, the long-term effects, maybe long-term kind of the accumulative effects of making misleading statements on the market to reputation, everything. But, I work at a company that's publicly traded. We are driven by quarters. I need to make my next quarter's numbers. I can't think about 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. And my internal research shows that if we take away that fair and balanced, statement, our sales are going to crash. I mean, how do I sell this to my CEO if he's focused on the next quarter's numbers?
Andrew, we can't hear you.
My apologies.
No
okay, so
problem.
I'm just pulling up a statistic because it was in one of the slides that not one that I spoke. So I'm just going to grab that really quick. So, okay. So one thing, yes, I completely understandable. So the quarterly revenue will not be as generous. And one thing that I think it's important to note is that I wouldn't say implement a strategy that results in a decrease in revenue from a quarter standpoint, because there is absolutely no way that any executive would then agree on that. Because even if there's a projected financial increase, obviously there's no expected financial increase. So you can't go off a whim of projecting and then have your next quarter just flatline. So I think that's a great point. But I think we can use statistics to at least gain a little bit more of strength in the long run and have a little bit of consistency in the short run. So revenue, I'd say with the implementing strategy, would remain constant in the sense of not drastically changing immediately the advertising strategy. So for example, for Nutella, I wouldn't say immediately, or I mean, Nutella wouldn't be that drastic of a change, but slightly changing wordings, not including the word balance, wouldn't be completely unreasonable. And those who would notice the change, it would be drastic. So for those who now know Nutella is not part of a balanced diet, but would like to include it in their desserts every so often, they're still purchasing the product, but they just are understanding what the product is and how it contributes to their diet. So from the respect of like slightly changing the message, I wouldn't say that changes the revenue too much. As far as advertising, Nutella is or has been known for their advertising and advertising for their breakfast foods. There are many successful advertising techniques that wouldn't necessarily have to align with what they have done. Any especially on the popular social media nowadays, there are many ways to implement a advertising strategy for their product, even if it's a snack product, even if it's a dessert product, that will gain a lot of customer attraction and attention. And so, yeah, so in my expectation for this implementation is that revenue is not going to decrease within the first couple quarters. And it's just from statistics. So I'll put up the fact that the inbound marketing, so the marketing strategy that is focusing on building customer relations, has a 126% more, it has 126% more leads than those who don't use inbound marketing. So, and essentially it's a higher retention rate. So although it's a high risk, it's a risk and reward situation. In the short term, the revenue is not going to increase drastically. However, in the long term, because of the higher retention and the more lead generation, it's reasonable to assume that it would be a risk for the company, but a risk from an ethical standpoint. So it's potentially either maintaining your profits, having greater future profits, or maintaining your profits, having greater future profits, and implementing an ethical solution. So I think it's just important the way that the strategy is implemented so as it doesn't drastically decrease revenue for the first couple quarters, and it maintains that revenue. And then for the future, because of the increase in transparency, you're able to have that customer client relationship and ultimately improve total revenue growth.
All of our companies are struggling with hiring and retaining top talent. In any of your research that you did, would any of your strategies make a difference with regard to our internal employees?
I believe that it would, as most, especially the talent that's coming in like currently and from freshly graduated students, top talent is more like consciously minded about ethical issues, and in making sure that your company values align with that, you're more likely to attract those employees and fresh talent and top talent.
I would also like to add that our consulting firm specifically too is focusing on hiring diversity, and that's something that's very, very, very important now. And why do that? Why hire a greater or larger pool of diverse candidates? Because you have diverse ideas, and it shows that you're a company that cares about values. You care about not hiring people solely based on university. You hire people based on experience and understanding of the industry and understanding their personal experience. And so that shows that the company specifically is transparent, and the company is also human. People don't want to work at a company it feels like they're a factory. They go in for a couple of years and then they're immediately pushed out to somewhere else. And so I think adding that level of transparency, knowing that this company specifically cares about its customers, and employees are going to be interested in working there, because if they care about their customers, they're certainly going to care about their employees, or hopefully.
I just have one more question. You talked about providing value to consumers. Could you be more specific about what is the value that, beyond just the abstract of health, what is it that should be driving us to understand? You haven't really painted a picture for me yet, which I know you will, about what that value is specifically that would drive us to want to move on this more rapidly. Can't hear you.
So I think there are a couple of values. So one, I would say the initial value is transparency. So that's something that we've been pretty much preaching this whole time. Having the value, having that value of transparency is important. But also, one thing we're focusing on is, because of the increase that Gen Z is going to have in the market, everyone's going to be getting jobs, and they're going to be a large portion of consumers in the food space. Their values are important. And so sustainability, and so that's the aspect of sustainability, not only from sustainability of recyclables, but a sustainability of just people in general. You want sustainable lifestyles. You want something. Gen Z aims to eat healthier, reduce the obesity epidemic, and then also improve the environment. The climate crisis is a tremendous issue that the United States is facing today, and so that's something that Gen Z sees and Gen Z recognizes, and Gen Z will want to contribute to companies that are striving to combat that effort, to improve that effort. And so I would say environmental sustainability, and then sustainability of life. And so what I mean by that is just being able to have a product that focuses on you as a client and focuses on bettering you as a client. That's not deceitful in any way. And so you're able to continue to purchase it for generations, for family, for years. And it's a sustainable product and something that you can consider and continue to use.
Okay, thank you very much. We are ending our roles and we are coming to you as us. And our goal is to give you feedback for the 10-minute and to support you in what we think would indicate the real strengths that we saw, as well as some suggestions. So who would like to go first?
I'm happy to go. First of
Okay.
all, congratulations, especially, and Steve said it, the fact that you're freshman is amazing that you took the initiative to do this. It's exciting to see that. And you did some things very, very well in your presentation. I'm sure my colleagues here will share some of the highlights. I'll just give you a couple of the things that I know stood out to me. I think you had some really good numbers and examples that you shared specifically. And I know this was already mentioned earlier by Aaron, but I think that side-by-side comparison of Nutella and the Hershey bar was very powerful. And that's a good thing then that you had that early on in your presentation. You had some other good facts, like the fact that it says 0 calories, but that's actually less than 5. And that Pam example, I think, was really memorable for that. Another key data point that stood out, the slide you had about the 46% obesity back in 1962, increasing to 75%. I mean, that was really alarming to the point where it may have been helpful to actually even bring that up sooner in your discussion. So lots of good areas there. You spoke clearly, you spoke well, and shared the discussion pretty equitably amongst you, which was nice to see. And I think you did a good job highlighting the issues here from an ethical standpoint. And I like how you were organized in sharing the techniques that they were using maybe to not be as transparent with consumers. One of the suggestions I have for you, the legal area, there were actually a lot of really strong examples that would have popped up even without a big legal background. One of the ones that immediately comes to mind and is a big one for your generation is the Red Bull example. There was a very large settlement with Red Bull for saying they give you wings. And so that would have been powerful, especially as a drink. I think the drinking calories is a strong case. And I saw that in your executive summary. You spoke about some of the sugary drinks, and then it wasn't something that got brought up in your presentations. And so things like, just how much we consume when we're drinking and those kinds of products and their impact would have been another powerful argument to see. So I wanted to focus mostly on that legal side, because I know there's other feedback that the other judges will share with you. The only other thing that I would suggest that might be helpful, and give me 1 second, I'm reading through some notes here very quickly. One of the other things that I thought you did well, I just want to point to before I jump into anything else, was the pulling up the company values. And I know that was something that was a requirement for this, really speaking not just about overall ethical theory, but here's what the company's values are and how they're failing to meet that. And so having those 3 examples on the screen was nice to see as well. The other feedback I'll give you before jumping to the other judges was just be careful around some of those data points. I think they were really impactful. When they are impactful, there's a way to sort of make them more clear on the screen. When you do use them, like that 9% of the world's plastic recycle that I asked about, just make the connection for the audience. Like, here's why that matters to you. And that should be really evident throughout the whole presentation. So sometimes I come from a consulting background, and I'll tell you, like, the top of the slide, we called it the kicker. At the bottom, we would say, like, here's exactly what I want you to know and understand from what I just showed you. And so for each slide, you really want to think about that. Like, what is it I'm trying to get across to you? And then tell them what that is on the very front, so that's clear throughout the entire presentation. Overall, though, you did a great job. And I'm going to jump now to one of the other judges to share some feedback as well.
Aaron, do you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah, I agree. I agree with Hannah's statements overall. I thought your presentation was very attractive, very well put together, not overly text dense. Some people, some presenters, try to put everything they're going to say onto a slide, and then it's like overwhelming for the viewer. It's like a safety blanket for the presenter, but it's terrible for the recipients. And you guys did a good job using images, short, to the point, phrases and stuff like that to enhance your speaking presentation rather than to guide it or to act as a crutch. So that was good. You clearly had great transitions during the part where you were presenting just without questions. You had obviously practiced those transitions. You didn't overlap a lot in your topics that you covered, which was great. You clearly had your own areas of expertise, and you each of them, handled them separately. There was a clear division of labor, so that was great. As far as like feedback on things that could have done better, as Hannah mentioned, I mentioned earlier the impressive comparison between the Nutella and the Hershey bar, but don't weaken it then by saying things like misleading in a sense. No, you had them. You had your audience right there. You don't want to undercut yourself by using like those kind of weak phrases like in a sense. Make sure, especially when you're trying to convince people of something that they really don't want to do, you have to infuse a little bit of what I'd say empathy with them. Like understand that they're in a tough spot. You want to make these powerful arguments, but you also want to acknowledge the challenges they're going to face and say, okay, we understand that, you're going to have this pressure or that pressure. But these are the reasons why you should go in this direction anyway, rather than just making always, the positive argument or the strength of your argument. And then one last like positive point I wanted to bring out was in the Q&A, you guys did a great job, I think, of listening to what we were asking for, and sometimes even anticipating what the next question was. So that was something that Jacqueline did. I felt was really good. Like I was chomping at the bit to ask a question, and you were listening so well and kind of digesting that you were able to anticipate even what my question was, and I'll actually address it before I could even ask it. So that's always a good sign. With that, I'll pass it to Steve.
Thanks, and I agree with all of the great comments that have come just now. You guys did a great job. Again, as freshmen, it's very impressive that you took this on. There was a really nice balance among you. It was equal, it was even. You talked, the transitions worked very well, and you had a very compelling story to tell. There was a passionate, there was clear passion among you, and that passion came out. And I'll tell you that is critically important when you're trying to convince an audience of your story. Do you believe it? And I clearly got the impression that you believe what you were saying. You fundamentally understood it and you believed it. From a recommendation standpoint, though, at the beginning, I was a little bit confused as to what was the story. What were you anchoring what were you asking us? What was the problem statement and what were you asking of us? And it took time for that to come out. And I would have liked to have seen that at the very beginning and then had the linkage to that, had everything anchored in that problem statement and what you're asking of us. If everything had been anchored in that, I was able to make those connections, but I had to make the connections as time went on. And so being able to put that out there at the very beginning would have been very powerful. I am also very pleased that you linked your comments to the company's values. Obviously, in my line of work, values are critically important, but you need to take it the next step. Why? Why is it critically important that a company live its values? I mean, we have values, we talk about values. It's important that we adhere to our values, but you need to bring it home. Why? I mean, it's who a company is, it's our reputation. It's how we attract and retain talent. It's how we attract and retain customers. It transcends the profitability from a quarter to quarter to a long-term view of it. It's being able to talk to all of us as leaders of our industry as why all of this is critically important. And you had the argument as a Gen Z. You were there. It was. I mean, we're talking to the next generation of consumers and workers, and so I would take it one step further. I would just continue to build on what you're doing because it's very, very good.
Thank you, Steve. I think that you all deserve a lot of credit. I think that you picked a more amorphous topic that is harder to put in. So I'm going to there's lots of good things I can say, but my goal is to help you succeed tomorrow in the 10-minute. So I'm going to read the 10-minute. You already know what it is, but you have been called back tomorrow by the company you gave, and in this case, it was the conference, that you gave your presentation to for a second visit. They've asked you to speak only about the ethical aspect, which obviously you would, to explain why your solution successfully handles ethical issues. You'll have 10 minutes. There'll be no Q&A. You can't use your slides or a video, and you don't want to have more than 2 or 3 people on your team on this. Now, what I think is your beginning and your positioning of the slides that you showed was fabulous. You won't have that tomorrow. So think about what is it that will convey immediately the reason that they can respond to you and take action. One of the things that I think you need to think about is don't keep talking about ethics and don't keep talking about morality. Talk to the specifics of how a particular thing impacts something else. For example, Andrew, you had a great comment when you talked about, when I pushed you, you talked about the pollution and obesity. If those are going to be your 2 points that make the strongest, and I don't know what you feel what points you want, but to focus in on that in 10 minutes, you've got very, very little time, but don't use big words that can seem abstract. Use things, and I think we've all sort of suggested this, use things to get to the heart of what it is you're trying to accomplish. And what you did was great. This is no criticism of that, except that it hampers you to really get the point that you want unless you actually use it. Conrad, you talked about in the legal response, which I thought was helpful, painting a company in a bad light. Now that's, again, abstract. Think about, but it brought us into the reputation issue. And I think we've all sort of touched on that. What we want for you is to be able tomorrow to use the fabulous research and the knowledge that you all have. And all of you made good points at one time or another, but think about what is the most, if you're really trying to sell someone, if you're really trying to sell inbound marketing, and you're really trying to make that as the driver of why these people should heed what you're saying. And I don't know enough about inbound marketing to know that, but you all must at this point. Give people a chance to get a solid, focused point that they can't just dismiss as you're being a good doer or you're just whatever, because the human aspect that was mentioned is great, but make it real. Hannah mentioned there were other legal stories. We won't be getting into the legal stories in 10 minutes, but think about impact. Because what will change people's minds, hopefully, is that they're being given something that is, and don't get into the diversity and all of that you mentioned. All of that's wonderful points, but your focus tomorrow is whatever you choose to hone in on, use the language that will help you sell your point. Now, you have some time to ask us questions. We welcome you asking us anything that you think is useful for you for tomorrow. Who's going to be making the presentations tomorrow?
It's going to be me, Melina, and Michael
Okay.
for the 10-minute ethics, and then Andrew's taking the 90-second.
Okay. So does it make sense to think about honing in on what you want to do in 10 minutes? And what do you think you're going to focus on?
I think we're probably going to focus on probably main concerns being the obesity and effects on the.
Okay.
I think we're thinking about probably moving that, talking about the jump in obesity or very early on to sort of, as you said, I think it was Hannah said that it was an attention grabber. So I think that that's something that will probably move more to the beginning to help get up the.
And just
Intention.
because you don't have the ability to show your wonderful slides, you can certainly figure out with some hand gestures, here's the bottle or whatever, and this much of it is already extra. I mean, you could think about a way of using your bodies or your hands to explain that. That sounds good.
One thing I wanted to question. So because I'm doing the 90-second. I know we really didn't talk about this much, but within the previous videos I've watched of past 90-second presentations, it sounds really much like a sales pitch, which in essence, because the general idea is stated at the beginning, and it sounds like it's one thesis, and it's continued throughout the 90 seconds, and it's high energy and in that respect. So how would you recommend approaching the 90-second, whether it's like in an outline format? Like, what would you recommend? Is it more focusing on the ethical standpoint, the law standpoint, and what are your thoughts on that?
Well, your focus is not on the law, it's on ethics for the 90-second. And you're overhearing a conversation and no one's talking about ethics. And so make your strongest, and you get to invent what they're talking about. So, I mean, you can start with, I hear what you're saying, but what's being forgotten here is blah, 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 blah. And use your best, strongest, because 90 seconds is not a lot. But your goal is not drama, or it's not, you're right about selling, but it's about the passion. I mean, it's not overplaying it, but it's about the reality that what's essential and what matters to you is that something's being overlooked that can't be overlooked, and it affects all of us, or, whatever. You get to have a very personal moment. I mean, there'll be a time perhaps when all of you are in an environment in your companies and people aren't talking about ethics. And you, because of IBEC and who you are and other things, the whole point of this is to give you practice, to be able to talk about something that a lot of people don't bother to mention. And maybe just instead of ethics, you talk about the specific values that you think need to be addressed, because people don't necessarily respond to morality, and they don't really respond to morally X or Y. But values like integrity, or values like other kinds of things that would fit, think about what that actually means, and don't just rely on the word, but back it up. Does that help? Any of the judges want to say anything else before we lose them?
I do have a question, if you don't mind, about the 10-minute presentation.
Of course.
Do you recommend us covering some of like the legal or financial information, but just focus ethics only?
Because what they've done is they called you back only to talk about the ethical aspects of the problem and to explain why your solution successfully handles the ethical issues. And so this gives you a chance to really hone in on, because 10 minutes is enough time for you to create the problem, the solution, and engage them with that. Because your whole point, and this is the word selling, your whole point is you're trying to sell this group. And I don't know the degree to which inbound marketing is your driver, but you've got to figure out what is the most compelling and what is nice to say, but isn't relevant in the 10-minute that was in the 25 minutes. Any other judges' comments before we say goodbye to them? I give you a tremendous amount of credit. And the fact that you're starting this as freshmen, I can't wait till you come back next year as sophomores with another topic. And if you did, the only feedback I would give you is you were light in the legal and you were light in the financial. And those are things that really matter in the full process. They don't matter again in the 10-minute and the 90-second. And you, again, you obviously did a lot of research, but as Hannah pointed out, it's really important to find the cases that you can actually turn to. I mean, it was great that you found the one with the 3 million, but just thinking ahead to the future, which hopefully you'll all do next year, that will be a stronger way to, because ethics is worth 2 times the amount, but still we are expected to look at the financial and the, I'm blanking, financial and legal, sorry. Thank you very much. I really wish you the very best. We all do tomorrow. And any final words?
Do you mind if I just add one thing?
Of course.
You had lots of great information about some of the deceptive practices because you're focusing tomorrow on ethics. I say the law is what we must do, ethics is what we should do. As you move into the what we should do, something you might think about looking at is also deceptive marketing toward children. You kind of glossed over it in the 90-minute, and it's a powerful argument. You're saying like Nutella, you're giving your kids Nutella and this is bad. And we were saying, well, informed consumers, can a kid really be informed? So that would be just a strong area to look into in terms of these techniques, is like, how is this targeting specifically vulnerable groups like children?
Makes a great deal of sense. Fingers crossed for you enjoying tomorrow. And I suspect you'll be spending some time today thinking about tomorrow. We wish you well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.